Boruto Chapter 19 was another mind-blowing chapter. From the action to the insane revelations and the setup for the future of certain characters, it was truly just a masterpiece. However, unfortunately to all of you Konohamaru fans out there, his stocks are at an all-time low, and I think it's about time that you all jump ship, because his situation probably isn't going to get any better anytime soon. And it looks like Boruto and Kash and Koji's alliance may be beginning to fall apart, but we also finally get to see Ryu going all out, and also the full extent of the Shinobi on this mission, which trust me, you do not want to miss. But quickly before we get into the chapter, if you do go on to enjoy this video, make sure to give it a like, and also if you want to see more Boruto content like this, then make sure to subscribe as well. But with that all said, let's get into this chapter review. So the chapter begins in a flashback between Shinki and Arya, where we get a bit of an insight into how this sand sealing sword was actually created. It seems as though Shinki infuses his chakra into the sword, and by doing this, when combined with Arya's innate technique of the wind style kenjutsu, he will also be able to manipulate Shinki's iron sand in a similar way to what Shinki himself was able to do. Which then makes sense as to why in the last chapter, Arya stated that he didn't think he would ever have to use this technique in this way against Shinki, obviously implying that this jutsu was created to act in a different way. And I guess because Ryu has a chakra of Shinki, there is still a link between the iron sand he uses and this sword. Shinki said that entrusting this technique in Arya is a way of protecting Gaara, his father as he calls him, saying that they need to take any means necessary to grow stronger in order to protect him. This obsession is very reminiscent of Kawaki's obsession with Naruto, and there is a big parallel between these two situations. Kawaki and Shinki were both left alone, and they both felt unloved and an outcast from their village. However, Naruto and Gaara respectively took them in as their own, making them both their sons. This led to both Shinki and Kawaki to grow insanely attached to their fathers because they had never experienced the love and nurture that these two provided them with, which is why we see them both obsessing over the idea of protecting the people who in their eyes saved them from the pits of darkness. And that's why we can see the parallel there between the actions of these two characters, where all their motives seem to be just to protect their fathers. Arya then says to Shinki that he should at least cast some of his attention onto Yodo instead of solely focusing on Gaara. But Shinki says that he may only focus on protecting Gaara, but Arya seems to have an obsession with Yodo as well. But this was also shown when Arya let Shinki sacrifice himself, but then instead held Yodo back from endangering herself in a similar way to what Shinki did. And I don't know whether this will hold importance later down the line, but it could suggest that Arya will sacrifice himself at some point for Yodo if she were to be in a lot of danger. Regardless, we then cut back to the Sand Village mission, where Arya slices his sword once again, which frees Mitsuki from Ryu's iron sand. As it seemed as though Ryu had actually trapped Mitsuki as well, he just wasn't using him as a puppet like he was with Sarada. Arya then tells them all to focus on attacking Ryu, and he will work from the backlines, getting rid of the sand when he tries to use it. Ryu says that their confidence is going to come back to bite them, as they shouldn't underestimate his levels of power, which causes Ryu to say that from this point onwards he is going to go all out. He then uses a massive load of sand to almost pummel or brute force an opening inside of the shinobi, but Ryu clearly hasn't learned his lesson, as Arya is able to literally slice away the entire barrage of sand with relative ease. Ryu then tries to adopt a different tactic, since he knows that Arya can easily deal with his sand, and he realizes that he needs to attack Arya before he can even activate that technique, because it's all well and good having a direct counter, but because this technique doesn't have a constant effect of dispelling the iron sand, if Ryu were to catch Arya off guard, then he wouldn't have the time to get rid of the sand. So Ryu tries to attack Arya from behind, but Yodo manages to notice this, alerting Arya of where this sand is coming from. Ryu notes that Yodo's sensory or insight is perfect when it comes to detecting his sand, which will definitely be useful later in the chapter. Sarada then goes on the offensive and uses the fireball jutsu against Ryu, but Ryu makes an iron sand wall and relatively easily blocks his attack from Sarada, which kind of goes to show how much trouble they would actually be in if they didn't have Arya's sword, allowing them to dispel the sand. And yes, that is foreshadowing for later in the chapter, because things are about to take a turn for the worst. But before that happens, the shinobi still have the upper hand. So whilst Ryu is dealing with the attack from Sarada, Mitsuki appears behind him, already in sage mode, and his snakes wrap up Ryu, which completely traps him from moving. Mitsuki then tries to land an attack on Ryu, who cannot move right now, but Ryu manages to literally turn himself into sand. Like, what in the Logia type devil fruit is Ryu on right now? Because they ain't got no haki to be able to counter a Logia type devil fruit. And when you also consider the fact that Ryu has like 5 ways of evading attacks, the possibility of defeating this guy in their current state just gets lower and lower. He has the ability to turn himself into sand, he has the claw marks, he has the claw grind where he can teleport freely between them, he has the Rinnegan. Like, this just isn't fair. You can hardly hardly hit this guy whatsoever. Arya explains that Ryu has the ability to turn his physical body entirely into sand, however he doesn't necessarily become one with the sand, and his body is just turned into smaller pieces, meaning that if you can locate the small grains of sand that makes up his body before he actually blends together to make himself back up again, you can still attack him. So it's not quite as broken as it may seem, as if he was able to reform his body using any iron sand in that area, that would be completely busted. But he can still control the iron sand his body becomes, meaning he can separate off into different directions and cause all the sand to come together in a different location. Yoda then uses once again her enhanced hearing capabilities and is able to hear the friction between some of the sand grains growing louder, obviously implying that the sand that makes up Ryu's body is starting to fuse back together, causing friction which allows Yoda to be able to hear it. Yoda then points Arya in the direction where the sand is accumulating, which then allows him to slash the air within that vicinity. This then goes on to show us the extent of Arya's technique, where Arya was able to manipulate the sand in the area of the slash, which then completely puts Ryu back together. So basically he forces Ryu back into his original form before Ryu was able to do it himself. Then they use this opportunity whilst Ryu is off guard from being prematurely pieced back together, and Mitsuki, still in Sage mode, attacks Ryu with his snakes, which does draw blood from Ryu. Sarada uses the opportunity of Ryu still recovering from Mitsuki's attack, and she lands an absolutely massive Chidori after activating her Sharingan. And no, unfortunately this was not her Mangekyo, but don't worry, by the end of this video I'll explain why this dojutsu is likely going to be coming by the end of next chapter, so hopefully we won't have to wait too much longer to finally see that long awaited awakening. This wasn't quite enough however, and Ryu manages to turn himself into sand once again because he was not quite knocked out from this. We then cut to Matsuri and Konohamaru, where Matsuri is really not happy with what Konohamaru said about her not being able to call him by the name of Konohamaru-chan. She shouts, saying that she just wants to call him Konohamaru-chan and what could possibly be wrong with that. But Konohamaru decides to shout back that he just doesn't like her calling him that. But this dumb useless piece of trash is starting to get on my nerves here. All of those people saying it's time for Konohamaru to come back and that he's going to live from this situation, I honestly just don't think this dumbass even deserves to live at this point. Bro is sacrificing his entire damn life just because he doesn't like the name that she is calling him. Like, come on man, just grow up. You really aren't helping yourself beat the allegations of being completely useless. Like, please just lock in, my guy. Matsuri then uses the root around her neck and starts literally engulfing Konohamaru's head in the same tree material that we see when someone is turned into a tree from a claw grime. Matsuri is clearly the toxic type, calling Konohamaru's side chick Moegi a tramp, saying why is she the only one allowed to call Konohamaru that name, and it's simply just not fair, showing those childlike qualities that these Shinju have shown to have at some point, where since they are essentially newborns, they haven't fully matured into a quote-unquote normal functioning human. And it's been shown many times how they don't always act in the normal stern and menacing way that most villains tend to adopt. This could also show us that these Shinju are still constantly evolving, both mentally and physically, which is also shown in that insane thirst for knowledge that all of these Shinju have shown to have, which may make it almost a race against time to deal with these guys whilst they are still in their early stages of development, as if they start to consume their targets and grow in knowledge and power, they will become too big of a threat to be able to handle. And this emphasis on dealing with them as soon as possible may trigger what I think is going to be the next arc of Boruto, which will be the training arc, and I'll go a bit more in depth later in this video. But getting back to the chapter itself, Matsuri calls Konohamaru selfish, saying that she should be able to call him by whatever she wants. Konohamaru replies saying that she is the selfish one for being so obsessed with just a name. But what is actually going on here? Why are these two having a squabble over a name? Like, I would expect this from Matsuri given she is a newborn, but come on, hang up the fries, Konohamaru, I know you're better than this. However, this entire moment was actually foreshadowed to us at the very beginning of this arc. It's clear that Kashin Koji devised a plan that had the highest likelihood of success from looking into the future, and he relayed exactly what they needed to do to Shikamaru, who could then try and put this plan into fruition by ordering the shinobi to stick to the plan that he's just devised. But what is important to note here is the emphasis Shikamaru placed on the idea that Konohamaru must under no circumstances grow attached to Matsuri or treat her as if she were a human. This is because Kashin Koji would have seen into the future and foresaw where it will start to fall apart is when he sees the resemblance between Matsuri and Moegi, and this ends up taking a toll on him mentally, meaning he can't be as cold-hearted to fulfill the mission that he needs to do. Shikamaru said many times, treat them like a beast, don't fall for the trap of thinking Matsuri Matsuri's moegi, and he said other things along those lines, all to try and prevent this exact situation from ending up occurring. But because Konohamaru is useless, he failed to detach his mind from the attachment he has to moegi and treat Matsuri, as Shikamaru described, like some wild beast. Anyways, this argument continues to escalate even more, and we can see Matsuri continues to engulf Konohamaru more and more in her roots as this argument intensifies. We then see Ada, who is watching the situation unfold, and she says that it's probably the name itself that is causing this issue with Konohamaru, where he's too fixated on the relationship he has with moegi that means that he can't just simply look past Matsuri calling him that name. And Ada says that Konohamaru simply just doesn't understand the situation. Now, it's important to know that I'm making this video based on fan translations, just so I can get this video out in time, so that entire scene may not make entire sense, but hopefully you guys can have a little bit more clarity on what that means once the official translations are out, so just bear that in mind for the time being. Regardless, Cash and Koji ask Ada about the Sand mission's current situation. Ada reports that Konohamaru is in a lot of trouble since he has made Matsuri extremely angry, stating it looks like he is about to be eaten alive. Cash and Koji then ask what's going on with Sarada's side of the mission, which might be foreshadowing that Sarada is the key role player on that side of that mission, suggesting that maybe the Mangekyo Sharingan is coming. I mean, I'm grasping at straws here, but we are 19 chapters deep and still no sighting of that damn dojutsu. Can you blame me for being that desperate? Regardless, Boruto asks whether Ada thinks that they will be able to defeat Ryu, clearly showing his concern for Sarada, as he feels like it's his responsibility while Sasuke is a tree to look after Sarada since Sasuke cannot. Hence why it might seem that he's more focused on Sarada than Konohamaru, who's literally on death's door. Ada says it looks like they're putting in a decent fight, but it's unclear how it will end, and the situation is extremely difficult to gauge. Also stating that assisting Konohamaru in particular is especially difficult because he is halfway through being consumed. We then cut to Jura in the Shinju realm, where he goes on a little rant about human nature, so strap in because we're about to dive into some straight waffle with no syrup. Jura states that he believes that life should ideally move towards the goal of evolution, which is driven by purely a person's instincts. However, humans are often unable to do that because they are bound by the social nature called reason, which clouds their instincts of seeking evolution. He says that this is the drawback from gaining intelligence, where you lose the ability to act solely on your evolutionary instincts. Jura states that where the Shinju differ is they are able to remain true to their instincts, and he describes it as a fatal flaw in human beings. Mamushi says, "What you're saying is great and all, but I couldn't care less." And he goes on to say, "Why is this even important to me?" Mamushi is actually just such a funny character, and I can see him almost being like the jester among the Shinju, which would definitely make for an entertaining character. Jiro then goes on to say that the reason that this is relevant to them Shinju is because there are still more drawbacks that come along with intelligence. He says that the concept of love is also a serious problem for them Shinju, because that is something which unfortunately they also have to deal with. Obviously referring to how Matsuri is being infected by this love right now, which means once again she can't act purely off her instincts to grow and evolve. Going back to Konohamaru and Matsuri amidst this lecture from Jura, Matsuri says that her mind is filled by thoughts about Konohamaru, which is driving her to a state of insanity. She doesn't understand why she feels this way and describes it as unbearably painful and frustrating. She then realizes that in order to get these feelings to go away, she must devour Konohamaru. We then go back to Professor Jura, who says that although the Inashika Cho team are all very skilled ninjas, they chose to prioritize the safety of their team over their own lives, despite it putting them in grave danger. Regardless, Jura says that Inogen was the most caught up by that feeling of love and lost his composure, needlessly costing him his entire life. He says that the reason for all of this all stems from love, which is why it is so dangerous to these Shinju, because it distorts how people tend to think. Hidari asks Jura what even is love, and is it some kind of disease? And I know damn well this guy ain't supposed to reflect Sasuke, because my Dark Knight Sasuke would never be this utterly lost. I think the writers have got a grudge against Sasuke at this point, because they are making Hidari this clueless all the damn time is absolutely wild. Jura says that he himself doesn't entirely understand the origins or the workings of love, since it is an extremely difficult concept to grasp. But at the bare minimum, love is the root cause of malfunctions in the brain of many life forms who have intelligence. He says that their instincts is trying to warn them about love, and he says that it must be understood and overcome in order for them to become a truly divine entity. So with the Yap session over, the main takeaway from this lecture of Jura's was that the entire collapse of Konohamaru's side of the mission is solely due to love, and that being a concept which infects even the Shinju, which then sets the foundation for if Matsuri is to set aside her instincts of love and focus purely on evolution instead, then she will be able to lose the only downside of their instincts that infects the Shinju. But that will only come if she's actually able to consume Konohamaru, emphasizing even more the importance of Konohamaru's side side of the mission, and given he is so close to consumption, I still think there is hope for his character where he can reignite that ambition for love inside of Matsuri. Anyways, we go back to Sarada's side of the mission where they are still on high alert looking for Ryu. Yodo manages to locate him once again, and Arya manages to force Ryu out of hiding from above them. But Ryu this time tries to ambush them by letting out a bunch of claw grimes from his claw-marked cloak, which pounds on the shinobi. Sarada then uses the Fireball Phoenix Jutsu to try and attack them, and Mitsuki also uses his snakes to try and get rid of the claw grimes before they even land. But their attacking potency isn't enough to get rid of the claw grimes whilst they're still in the air, and Ryu continues to pull more and more of them out of his cloak to attack the shinobi. Yono gets cornered and a claw grime starts to nibble at her shoulder, and Arya is having none of it, and he tries to slash open the claw grimes with his blade. But he gets stuck halfway through the claw grime's shoulder and he can't seem to pull it out, which I'm sorry, but it just shows how insane the gap in power is between the kenjutsu of Arya and Boruto. And for context, I don't think Boruto's main way of fighting anymore is with a sword, or at least he is equally as proficient in other techniques, but Arya is solely a kenjutsu based fighter, and Boruto was able to easily cut through multiple claw grimes in seconds like they were literally made out of butter, but a kenjutsu master couldn't even get more than a foot into the side of a claw grime. I think this moment just shows that there are levels to this business, and Boruto is an incomprehensible amount of steps ahead of all of these other shinobi. Anyways, Ryu notices that the sword is stuck and he teleports to the claw grime and then teleports it away so that sword is also gone. And even the shinobi on this mission know that without that sword, it is completely and utterly hopeless for them. And Ryu states to them outright, now they can't counter his Iron Sand, he will become unstoppable. And back to Konohamaru and Matsuri, she has basically fully engulfed Konohamaru by this point, saying it's time to become one Konohamaru-chan. So first of all, I want to discuss Sarada's side of things. Since they are in such a dire situation, since they rely so heavily on Arya's technique, there is no doubt that they stand absolutely no chance against him in their current form, which obviously implies that something has got to change for them to be able to turn this battle back in their favor. And there is three options here. Boruto shows up, Kawaki shows up, or Sarada uses her Mangekyo Sharingan. First of all, I don't think Boruto will show up. However, what I think is more likely to happen instead is when Ada reports that they are now about to get demolished by Ryu, since they can't counter his Iron Sand, Boruto will go against Kashinkoji's word and try to go save them all. Because like I said, he has a massive feeling that he has to protect Sarada while Sasuke is turned into a tree. But Kashinkoji simply won't let this happen, and he will either have a shouting match against Boruto, or he will take physical measures to force Boruto not to go on this mission, which may actually cause a physical altercation between these two, which I think would make for an amazing scene or moment. So realistically, I don't think Boruto will end up going on this mission. I think they will most likely be Kawaki who saves the day here. Kawaki is about to get his limiters removed, and it is very clear that this will be relevant to their current mission because the whole situation has been intertwined into the story to happen at the same time as this mission. And also, if we look at the plan which was devised by Kashinkoji, it's clear that their primary goal was to stall the Shinju as if they were waiting for something to happen. But they couldn't have just waited for Kawaki to get his limiters removed to go on this mission, since the Shinju were making their move, so someone had to go to stop or stall them from reaching Gaara or Shinki, which to me implies that once Kawaki gets his limiters removed, he will go on this mission to save them. But at the same time, I think Kawaki won't be able to go straight away, so in the meantime, Sarada's Mangekyo will grant her enough power to be able to hold off Ryu, waiting for the moment for Kawaki to be able to arrive. So we might get a 2-for-1 deal where we get to see Kawaki's new insane levels of power, and also finding the Mangekyo Sharingan. And for Konohamaru's side of things, honestly, I think that since he hasn't been fully consumed, and because of what Jura was saying, of the Shinju's main flaw being of love, I think there's a slim chance, but I think it's definitely possible that he can rectify his mistake and manage to get Matsuri to focus on fulfilling her desire of love. Because if she were to do that, she would not want to consume him, and instead they can go back to having a conversation. But at the same time, I feel like him getting consumed would still make much more sense. If you think about it, Konohamaru's death would trigger a massive reality check that specifically Sarada and Mitsuki that they still need to grow in terms of power, as their lack of strength and competency cost them their sensei's life, who they love and has been with them for almost their entire shinobi journey. But Konohamaru's death would be extremely meaningful in terms of progressing the story and giving certain characters that motivation. And to all of those people who think that Konohamaru still has not reached his full potential, with how it was worded, I think because Matsuri said, let's become one Konohamaru, maybe killing Matsuri will inadvertently save Konohamaru as well, which would mean that he can return to the story and reach that potential everyone sees in him. But I don't think there will be any awakening physically, at least here, that will allow him to beat or hold Matsuri off. I think it will either be him overcoming that mental barrier or simply him getting consumed, which would then trigger or call for the next arc, which I think I said earlier, I believe will be a training arc, as Sarada and Mitsuki would become motivated to grow in terms of power, and so would Boruto, which means Sarada will train to negate the drawbacks and properly use her Mangekyo Sharingan, as I believe that it will show up in this arc, but it will definitely come with some drawbacks, and she won't know how to properly use it yet. Meaning she spends the next section of the story mastering this power, maybe even with someone like Kakashi, who has held the powers of the Mangekyo Sharingan. And I think with Limitless Kawaki likely surpassing Boruto, perhaps he could train Boruto on how to use his karma once again, as unlike Kashin Koji, since Kawaki would be stronger than Boruto, it becomes a lot safer to allow Boruto to use his karma once again, which would obviously risk Momoshiki being able to take over. Because Kawaki's levels of power will mean that if Boruto gets taken over, Kawaki can still contain him, which is why Boruto didn't train with Kashin Koji, as he wasn't able to contain Boroshiki. He simply wasn't strong enough. And I think with Boruto being able to use his karma in the future, which we do know will happen since the flash forward sequence, and also him literally needing to get stronger to be able to defeat Jura, I think it could make a lot of sense for these two to train together. Also, they could do it in a different dimension, which Kawaki would obviously have access to, where Boruto doesn't have to worry about losing control and attacking his friends, which was a huge part of that burden or why he was so afraid to use his power. Also, it makes even more sense when you consider the fact that Kawaki was the person to teach Boruto in the first place how to use his karma properly. So this could parallel that, with Kawaki already showing to have a much larger understanding than Boruto, as well as most others, on how this power actually works. So that's why I think Konohamaru will get consumed, and it will also show us what actually happens when someone is consumed by their Shinju target, which is still a mystery left for us to uncover. Anyways, that is where the chapter ends, so I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter review. Leave your thoughts on the chapter in the comments down below, and if you disagree or want to add anything about what I said in the video, then also make sure to leave all that stuff down there as well. If you did enjoy, then make sure to smash that like button, just so this video gets pushed out to more and more people, and it also lets me know that you guys are enjoying the content at the moment. Also, if you want to see more content like this, where I post tons and tons of Boruto content almost every single day, then be sure to subscribe, as not only does it help out the channel massively, it also lets YouTube know that you want to see more content like this in the future. But with that all said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.